The day the Empire Araveth sky above New Earth turned silver without warning. It wasn't a sunset, though the light had that same golden warmth. It wasn't a storm, though everything seemed to hold its breath. People on the ground stopped. What they were doing, construction workers, children, soldiers in training, street vendors. They looked up in silence. The air shimmered. Time itself felt like it had tilted. And then came the ships. Not just ships, palaces in the sky. Vast, gleaming triangles with mirrored surfaces that stretched across the heavens like blades meant to cut the world in half. They floated down, slow and deliberate, humming with a power that made bones tremble. Humans didn't run. They watched. A single voice broke the silence. It was a child, no more than 8, standing on a rooftop beside her mother. Her words were simple. Are those aliens? Her mother placed a hand on the girl's head and whispered, "No, sweetheart. They're just another empire." At the heart of the descending fleet, a flagship opened like a flower of metal and fire. Something descended from it, glowing, beautiful, terrifying. It wasn't a creature. It was a projection, a being of light 10 stories high, cloaked in symbols older than memory, eyes like twin stars. It spoke, and though its mouth did not move, every living thing heard it clearly. Your planet has been evaluated and found suitable. Your species will kneel before the eternal galactic empire. In return, you will be spared. The silence that followed was heavy. Birds stopped flying. Waves halted mid-crash. It was as if the world itself was stunned. And then a man laughed. Not just a chuckle. A full, unashamed, stomach-holding laugh that echoed through the valley. His name was Lieutenant Elias Corin, and he was just a logistics officer for the Planetary Defense Corps. Not a hero, not a legend. Just a man who fixed broken satellites and made sure water ran clean. But now, every camera on Earth turned toward him, every alien sensor locked on. And still he laughed. The Empire's voice returned, colder now. "Explain." This reaction. Elias wiped a tear from his eye and stepped forward. "You came all this way. For what? To tell us to kneel? To show off your glowing light show and booming voice? Buddy, we've seen worse. We've survived worse. You're late." "Way too late." The projection flickered. "You do not understand. We have destroyed worlds for less defiance." Elias nodded, but his face didn't show fear. It showed something else. Something that made every alien sensor flicker in confusion. "Yeah, and we've rebuilt worlds from dust. You burn, we grow. You conquer, we remember. You call yourselves eternal. But let me ask you this, how many times has your empire made that same speech? And how many times has it worked?" There was movement across the crowds now, people rising. Not to fight, but to stand side by side. Teachers, farmers, engineers. They didn't raise weapons. They raised their heads. The Empire's projection faded, then returned, smaller this time, more human-shaped, more uncertain. "You do not kneel," Elias smiled. "Nope, not today, not ever." Far above, hidden within the flagship, a cluster of alien commanders argued in sharp clicks and ancient tones. One of them, a veteran of 17 conquests, leaned forward and spoke into the silence of the control chamber. "They are either the most foolish species we've met, or the most dangerous." And in the shadows of that same ship, something stirred. Part of the Empire, not loyal to its rule, but deeply interested in the humans below, especially the one who laughed. The ones who watched from the dark, the Empire's ships remained in orbit, hovering like a silent threat carved into the sky. For 3 days they didn't move, they didn't speak. They simply watched. And so did humanity. Cities stayed active. But tension crawled beneath the surface. Children still played, but their laughter had a nervous edge. Soldiers stayed close to their bases. Elders told old stories again of first contact, of the burning of Mars, of the time Earth stood alone. And didn't Fall Dot and Elias Corrin? He went back to work. He cleaned a broken satellite tower in Sector 3, joked with the crew, made bad coffee, and whistled as if a galactic empire wasn't aiming world-ending weapons at their home. But above him, in a hidden section of the Empire's flagship, another kind of watching took place. They weren't like the commanders. They didn't sit in golden chairs or wear robes of authority. They had no names spoken aloud. They existed in the Empire's deep code silent, observing and recording. They were known only as the ones in the dark, and they were confused. This human does not fit expected parameters, one whispered, its voice more thought than sound. He is not a leader, not a warrior. He has no genetic enhancements. No royal blood, said another. A third one watched a replay of Elias's laughter on a loop. Yet when he spoke, they listened, all of them. Without command, without fear. This may be something we have not seen before. For the first time in centuries, the Watchers in the Dark sent a request to the Empire's high core. Observe the human called Elias Corrin directly. Do not interfere. Do not threaten. Only watch. Meanwhile, Elias had no idea he was being watched by something more dangerous than the ships in the sky. He only knew that when he walked through the streets, more people nodded at him. Some offered coffee. Others asked what they should do if the Empire attacked again. He always gave the same answer. You breathe, you build. You live, that's what we do. But on the fourth night, something changed. Elias returned home to find his door already open. Not broken, not forced, just open. He paused, listened, stepped in. There was someone sitting on his couch. Not human. Not like any alien he'd ever seen before, either. Tall, slender, with skin that shimmered like obsidian glass. Its eyes glowed faintly blue like dying stars. It didn't speak. It simply watched him. Then it tilted its head and said in a quiet voice, You are wrong. Elias raised an eyebrow. Wrong about what? About your strength. About your species. You should not be able to do what you did. You should not stand, and yet I laughed, Elias said. The figure stood. You have changed something. The Watchers noticed, and now others will come. Elias blinked. Others? The figure turned to leave. But just before it stepped through the door, it said one last thing. I hope you're ready, human. Not all of them. Come in peace. And some are older than empires. The door closed behind it without a sound, and Elias Corrin stood in the quiet, his heart thudding, the silence louder than any war cry. Far above, the Empire still hovered. But now, it wasn't. Alone. Something else had started watching too. Something ancient. When the stars blinked 3 days after the shadowed visitor left Elias's home, something shifted in the stars. Astronomers noticed it first. A patch of the sky near the Orion Gate went dark, not like a power outage, but like someone had turned off the stars themselves. One by one, systems went silent. Colonies didn't respond. Probes vanished. The Galactic Empire sent scouts, none came back. On Earth, the silence began to feel heavy. Like the calm before a scream. Elias Corrin sat in the park across from the training academy, drinking bitter coffee and staring at the sky. Crowds still gathered around him, sometimes asking for advice, encouragement, even guidance. But Elias didn't pretend to have answers. He only had one rule now: tell the truth, even when it's terrifying. And the truth was this: something out there was waking up. He still remembered what the visitor in black had said. Not all of them come in peace. On the fourth day, the sky changed again. Not from the Empire, not from humans. It came from somewhere in between. A single point of light appeared where the stars had gone dark. It wasn't a ship. It was a signal. A silent pulse of golden energy, like a heartbeat. Every sensor in the Empire went blind. Human technology didn't even register it. But Elias, he felt it. He didn't hear it. He felt it in his bones. Like a whisper made of thunder. Then came the dreams. Not just his dreams, everyone's. Humans across the globe began waking up with the same memory. Standing in an empty field under an orange sky, facing something vast, something ancient, something with eyes like mirrors. And in every dream, that thing said only one sentence. We remember what you did on Ardea. The name meant nothing to most. But Elias knew. Ardea was a dead world long abandoned, burned in the early days of the galactic wars. It had never recovered. Except now, something claimed to remember. The Empire called for a full planetary lockdown. Commanders panicked. Humans didn't single quotes T. They gathered in city squares, lighting fires and telling stories, singing old songs. When fear rose, they leaned on each other. And again, Elias stood at the center not because he asked to, but because people saw something in him. Resilience, kindness, something the empires couldn't replicate with machines or power. But that night, as Elias walked home, he found someone waiting in the shadows again. Not the same as before. This one was taller, cloaked in pale gold, with hair like burning strands of light. It didn't speak at first. Then it knelt. Elias froze. What the hell are you doing? The being lifted its head, paying respect. We thought humanity extinct. We were wrong, and now we are afraid. Elias stepped back. Afraid? Of what? The being looked toward the stars, where that golden pulse still flickered like a warning. Of what your memory might awaken. Elias narrowed his eyes. We don't remember Ardea. But someone does, the being said. And their memory is older than your species, older than the Empire. If they rise, even your laughter won't stop what comes next. Elias didn't laugh this time. Instead, he whispered, Then we better remember. Fast, the stars above flickered again like eyes blinking open for the first time in 1,000 years, and this time, they looked straight at Earth. The memory buried in human blood beneath the frozen crust of what used to be Ardea. Something pulsed. It wasn't alive. It wasn't dead. It was memory, ancient, tangled, waiting. And now, after thousands of years, it stirred. On Earth, Elias Corrin sat in a sealed room deep below New Geneva, surrounded by historians, xenolinguists, and war veterans. A projection hovered before them, a swirling golden symbol sent from the same light pulse that had darkened stars and silenced colonies. The Empire couldn't read it, but a human child had drawn it from memory the night before, after waking. From a dream she couldn't explain. No one else could translate the symbol. Except Elias. He didn't know how he knew, but when he looked at it, something inside him shifted. A weight. A door creaking open in the corners of his thoughts. And he spoke the meaning aloud without hesitation. This is not your war, but your wound still bleeds. The room went silent. A historian whispered, How do you know that? Elias rubbed his forehead. I don't. I just feel it. Like it's not coming from me, but through me. Outside, the sky darkened again. Not from the Empire this time. They were retreating. The mighty galactic empire, the one that threatened Earth with godlike technology, had started pulling back their ships. Not in fear of humans, but in fear of the light. The Watchers in the dark had sealed themselves off from the rest of the fleet, refusing orders, refusing even to speak. And in their silence, they whispered one name over and over: the buried. Kin. No record in the Empire's history mentioned them, but the humans were starting to remember. Not Through books. Through blood. Across Earth, people began to share the same dream again. Not of the golden being this time, but of battles fought in fields of ash. Of voices screaming in a language no one had taught them. Of fire falling from skies painted red. Children woke with ancient war chants on their lips. Elders wept without knowing why. And Elias saw her. A woman. Tall, silver-eyed, wrapped in torn banners. She stood in the center of the memory, looking at him, reaching out. And every time she touched him in the dream, he felt pain and love. When he awoke, her name was the first word out of his mouth, Ilari. He didn't know who she was, but his chest ached like he'd known her for lifetimes. In the Empire's council chambers, chaos boiled. Some demanded Earth's destruction before the buried kin fully awoke. Others screamed that it was too late. The Empress herself, a being that had ruled for 900 years, stood and broke protocol. "They are not what we thought," she whispered. "They are not a species, they are a scar." Far away in the ruins of Ardia, the ground cracked. Open. And something stepped out. Tall. Silent. Human. But not from Earth, and it began to walk toward the stars. The human who never came from Earth. In the cold silence of deep space, just beyond Ardia's dead orbit, the figure floated, unshielded, unarmed, untouched by vacuum. Scanners couldn't measure him. No life signs, no tech signature, no breathing. And yet, he moved, calmly, as if space itself bent around him to let him pass. On Earth, Elias Corrin woke up gasping. Not from fear. From recognition. He had never seen the man before, not in life, not in images, but somehow he knew, deep in his bones. In the ache behind his eyes, this was not the enemy. This was not a god. This was a memory with skin. And it was walking toward Earth. In orbit. The Empire's last defense line trembled. Generals argued. Artificial minds stuttered. Even their most advanced drones refused to fire on the approaching figure. Not out of malfunction, out of refusal. "Do you recognize it?" The Empress asked the watchers in the dark. Their answer came like a chill across the command deck. "Yes. We erased them once, or thought we did. But now they remember." On Earth, the strange dreams deepened. Humans began waking up with new scars, wounds that didn't bleed, didn't hurt, but glowed faintly with golden light. They appeared on arms, over hearts, behind ears, shapes like old war runes. Some panicked. Others wept. A few simply stared in silence, like something inside them had just woken up after sleeping for thousands of years. Elias had 3.1 on his back, one on his chest. And one pulsing quietly in the center of his palm. It felt like fire and truth. Governments tried to hold things together. Messages flooded the airwaves. "Remain calm. This is not an attack. We are safe." But the people didn't need officials anymore. They looked to each other. They helped strangers. They shared food and blankets. Fear didn't divide them, it pulled them closer, because deep down, they all understood something. Now, this wasn't about Earth. This was about humanity itself, and the parts of it that had been forgotten. Deep beneath the academy, Elias stood in the archive vaults, staring at a massive holographic wall filled with incomplete data. Old transmissions, static-filled images from the earliest deep space voyages. None had made sense before. Now they did. He found her face again, Ilari, the woman from his dreams, but she was real. Recorded by a human scout team 3,000 years ago. Marked as non-human. Never followed up. She looked just like the ones walking out of Ardia's cracked surface now. Not invaders, not messengers, but remnants of something older than the empires. Older than the galactic wars. Older even than Earth's first colony. "Ship, what are they?" Someone asked Elias in a trembling voice. He whispered the only answer that felt right. Double quotes us. They're us. At that moment, the golden figure from Ardea stepped into human orbit. He hovered just above Earth's moon. And for the first time, he spoke. Every being across the galaxy heard it. Through dreams, through machines, through silence. We left ourselves behind to keep you safe. Now the chains are breaking. Remember us. Remember who you are. On Earth, across oceans and deserts, across cities and ruins, millions of humans fell to their knees not in worship, but in awakening. They weren't just people of Earth anymore. They were pieces of something much, much older. And now that ancient. Part of them had come back. Not to rule, but to stand beside them. Elias looked to the sky. And without meaning to, whispered, "Then let the galaxy watch." The galaxy holds its breath. Stars were no longer quiet. News of the golden figure, of the one who walked from Ardea without air, armor, or fear spread like fire across every known system. Across empires, pirate fleets, deep void monasteries, and data temples, the same question echoed: who are the humans really? For centuries, humanity had been seen as stubborn, reckless, chaotic, useful for trade, occasionally dangerous, never divine, never ancient. But now their blood glowed with memory. Now, the golden symbols on their skin pulsed in harmony with something far older than the Empire itself, and worse for the Empire. At least humans didn't run. They didn't kneel. They didn't even ask for protection. They stood. On a broadcast viewed by trillions, Ilias Korn appeared again, no crown, no armor. Just a man in a worn jacket standing before the United Planetary Council of Earth. Behind him, a screen showed the face of the golden figure from orbit. His voice was calm, clear, human. "We've been afraid for too long. Afraid of the Empire. Afraid of the unknown. Afraid of ourselves. But that ends now. We remember who we are. Not conquerors, not victims. Something else. Something older. Something hopeful." He paused, then looked straight into the camera. "We won't raise weapons unless forced, but we will not kneel. Not again." The speech was short. But it shook worlds. In distant quadrants, oppressed species rose up, inspired by the human defiance. On Empire-controlled planets, slaves whispered Elias's name like a prayer. Even the Empress of the Galactic Empire, unshaken by war or rebellion for 9 centuries, stood alone in her chamber and stared at a glowing scar that had formed on her own palm overnight. One she couldn't explain. In the void between stars, the watchers in the dark debated. "It has begun," one said. "Should we intervene?" Asked another. The oldest of them answered, "We already did. When we erased their ancestors, when we buried the kin. This is not the beginning of a war. It is the return of balance." And somewhere, deep beyond the mapped sectors, other beings stirred, those older than empires, older than flesh. They had once known humanity, not as warriors, not as rulers, but as bridges. Humans were not meant to dominate the galaxy. They were meant to connect it. Meanwhile, the golden figure above Earth descended slowly, without threat, without defense. And when he reached the ground, no armies met him. No guns were raised. He landed in a field of sunflowers where a child waited. She walked up to him, held out her hand, and said with a smile, "We were waiting for you." The figure knelt, not in worship, but in peace. And behind him, more golden lights blinked into view above the world. 1, then 5, then dozens. Not ships. Not weapons. People. Returning. Humanity was no longer alone, but the galaxy wasn't ready for what came next, because humans had always been underestimated. Now, they were beginning to remember their purpose, and the stars would never forget it again. What humanity was meant to, Beatty skies above Earth shimmered gold. Not from fire, not from war, but from return. They came down in silence, those who had once been lost, buried beneath Ardia, erased from history. They looked like humans, but their presence carried something deeper, older, something that whispered to the blood. Every step they took on Earth stirred something ancient inside the people. Farmers felt their hands tingle in the soil like it was greeting them. Engineers started building machines they didn't fully understand, but their hearts knew were right. Artists painted symbols no one had taught them, but everyone recognized. Scientists, soldiers, children all across the planet. Something had awakened. Not fear. Not power. Memory. The galaxy watched in silence. Empire didn't speak. They couldn't. Their fleets remained in orbit, but they were empty now. Half the commanders had left. Some joined the humans. Others simply disappeared, their last messages filled with wonder and confusion. On one distant world, an entire Empire research lab burned its records and set its prisoners free. On another, a rebel shouted into the stars, "If they can stand, so can we." But not all saw it as hope. Some feared what was coming. Some prepared to strike before this awakening spread, and in the black corners of space, shadows whispered of war. On Earth, Elias Corrin stood at the edge of the old spaceport, facing the golden
figure who had returned first. They said nothing for a while.
Just watch the sunset bleed into the ocean. Finally, Elias asked, "What happens now?" The figure didn't smile, didn't frown, just looked at him with eyes full of stars. "That depends. What will you do with what you remember?" Elias looked out at the crowds, people working together, building strange towers that sang when the wind passed through them. Others planting glowing seeds into the soil. Still others simply sitting together, laughing softly, unafraid. "We'll try to be better," he said. "We'll fail sometimes, but we'll try." The golden figure placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. Then, "The wound is healing." Far above, the watchers in the dark shut down their systems. One by one, their minds went quiet. Not in defeat, but in surrender. They had been created to suppress memory. But now, their purpose was complete. The truth had returned, and it had chosen to walk on two human feet. In the weeks that followed, the universe began to shift. Small empires collapsed without war. Pirate fleets abandoned their stations and sent peace envoys. Long-lost species emerged from hiding to ask Earth how they had survived, and more importantly, how they had stayed kind. Humans didn't give speeches. They offered food, they shared stories, they listened. And in doing so, they built something the Empire had never imagined. Connection. On the 100th day since the Golden Return, a monument was unveiled, not of ships or heroes or battles, but of three children. A human. A golden-skinned kin, and an alien from a distant world. Holding hands. The inscription read, "We remembered, and we chose each other." The galaxy didn't fall that day. It shifted, and though not every world welcomed the change, most did. Not because humans forced it, but because they lived it. Elias Corrin was never called emperor, never wore a crown. He fixed satellites again, drank bad coffee, smiled too much, but his name was spoken on worlds. He never visited. As the man who laughed at an empire. As the man who remembered. As the man who reminded the stars what humanity truly was. Not rulers, not rebels. But bridges between worlds. And this time, no one would forget.